Kia ora everyone, thank you for zooming in from home and adapting at such short notice. It's great to be able to continue with this event tonight. I'm very excited to be able to talk you through the key proposals in the draft spatial plan. So starting off with the central city, there are some real opportunities here in our central city. We know we will have a doubling of the population over the next 30 years. That's pretty significant. Currently sitting at around 21,000 people, and that's expected to double. There are, as I said, there are many opportunities in the central city, but we also want to make sure that it is a livable space to be, and that we are building in resilience into our biggest suburb. So Te Aro is an area that we see many opportunities in, and I'll talk you through shortly what those key proposals are. There's also some real opportunities to be seen in the future mass rapid transit route that is currently being worked through as part of the Let's Get Wellington Moving program. We want to make sure that our intensification in the central city is also really reaping the benefits of the investment that will be going into that infrastructure. We also want to make sure that we're maximising the potential of the land we have in the central city. We don't have many big sites, so where we do have those opportunities, we really want to maximise the development potential. And as you heard in the video, we really want to bring nature back into the city, really build on the green spaces that we have and create more. So how do we get there? We are proposing a minimum building height in the central city of 6 stories. Now, this is partly in response to the government's national policy statement on urban development, which requires us to enable as much development as possible in our city centres. It's also a way of incentivising higher density development, as I said, making efficient use of the land we do have in the central city. In terms of Te Aro, we're looking to increase the maximum building height there to at least 10 stories. So currently it sits at around about 6 stories, and we're proposing to increase that to at least 10 to really incentivise some higher density development once again. We're also proposing to integrate some areas into the central city, one being in Thorndon, which is on the map there, the pinky salmon coloured area. It's currently zoned residential. But the land uses there are mixed, and whilst it is currently part of our character areas, our work does show that character is mixed. But of course, this is something we want feedback on from the community. And another area is Adelaide Road, so down at the bottom of the map there, the orange coloured area, currently zoned centres, and we're proposing to incorporate that into the central city as well, a way of future-proofing the central city, but also, again, maximising potential along a key transport route there. We've also got a big emphasis in the spatial plan on resilience, and in terms of the central city, there are some real anchor sites. These areas that are landmarks in our central city that we expect to be there in the long term and are good places to build resilience and therefore anchor future growth. So those areas include the Parliamentary Precinct, Pipitea Marae, Tinako Civic Square and Te Papa, where we are this evening. So those areas really provide some great opportunities, and of course greening the central city as well. At the same time, we really want to continue to protect what we've got in the central city. We've got a rich built heritage here in the CBD, and we want to continue to protect that. And of course, working with nature, and we're not ignoring the fact that we are vulnerable here to the effects of climate change, sea level rise, and so this draft spatial plan really focuses as well on things like water-sensitive design, living with more water, and how we can build our resilience in the long term. So we know that these areas are unique, and we know how much they are valued by the community. So I am going to focus on the pre-1930s character here, although I know that inner suburbs does cover broader areas. These areas are also very well located and to create an even more compact city, they are walkable neighbourhoods. And it was great to see that one of the things that people loved the most about their suburb in that first poll question was that it is walkable. So what we're trying to do through the draft spatial plan is really build on that kind of opportunity. So the inner suburbs create that opportunity to have more homes close to employment, services and public transport. We also know there's demand for housing in these areas. As you heard in the video, our current district plan rules do protect buildings that were constructed prior to 1930. That covers around 5,500 properties, so it's quite a lot. And it is streetscape character protection. It's actually not heritage protection, there is a distinction there. So when we first started this program of work, the Planning for Growth program, we asked what are the priorities for the city? And we've done an extensive assessment of these areas, a stock take, to understand what each property, how that contributes to the overall streetscape character. So that was a site-by-site assessment. We had people out in the field doing that work, assessing the contribution of each building to that wider character. What that shows is that, yes, there are some really great areas that have really good concentrations of character, but in other areas it is mixed, and there are opportunities for some change. We shared this with the community back last year when we engaged on the 4 growth scenarios, because we wanted to hear the views of the community prior to making any recommendations or decisions around which way to go with this. So the feedback was that these areas are really special. People still value them and they're part of Wellington's identity, but perhaps there is a way that we could refine that approach and really focus in on what's really special. So it's really understandable that people really value these areas, but by the same token, it's also really understandable that people can see opportunities for change and for creating more housing opportunities, warmer, safer, drier homes. So what we are proposing is a more targeted approach to protecting special character in these areas. So we're proposing to refine the boundaries of where these demolition controls apply to sub-areas. So in those areas we would be continuing to protect pre-1930s character by requiring resource consent to demolish those dwellings and retaining the status quo height limit of around 3 stories. Outside of those areas, we propose to remove the demolition controls, but still require resource consent for new developments, for multi-unit developments. Height limits in those areas would range from between 4 to 6 stories, a buffer around those sub-areas so that we aren't getting some really stark contrasting 3-storey buildings next to 6-storey buildings. That's not a good outcome. Good quality design is a really high priority for the council. You heard the Mayor talking about density done well. And we do still intend that these wider areas still have character value that needs to be considered through any new development. Our earlier assessment work that I mentioned also provides us with a strong basis to depart from the requirements of the government's national policy statement on urban development. So without that work, what that national policy statement would actually require of us is to enable densities of at least 6 stories, within a walking distance of the central city. That covers a large area of our inner suburbs. So what we're actually saying is that these areas still have value, and we consider that the characteristics here are such that we can depart from those requirements. I think it's really important that that is made clear. At the same time, we have also identified a number of buildings and groups of buildings within these areas that actually warrant further assessment in terms of their historic heritage value. So that's actually potentially leading to them having higher protection than they do currently. So it's not completely removing protections in these areas, but a more balanced and targeted approach. Last area to discuss, the outer suburbs. So as you heard in the video, when we engaged with the community on the scenarios last year, this idea of growing in and around our existing suburban centres was actually the scenario that got the most support. Something in the order of 62 or 64% of people supporting that scenario. In terms of what we've done since then, we've done an assessment of 15 suburban centres that have opportunities for accommodating growth into the future. And that is based around what we call our centres hierarchy, so from sub-regional centres such as Johnsonville right through to smaller neighbourhood centres. And what we've done is we've selected those 15 suburbs based on a range of criteria, but one of those in particular is the current sort of services and amenities that are already in that centre and the ability to support further growth and change. We also now have, as I've mentioned in both the last two presentations, the National Policy Statement on Urban Development, which does also set some requirements out for our outer suburbs. So one of those is that we must, as a council, enable densities of at least 6 stories within a walking distance of railway stations and major centres. And that walking distance is between 5 and 10 minutes. So you'll see that there are some, I'll show you maps shortly, so there are some significant changes proposed along our railway corridors, but we also still have a focus on the centres as well. As we've mentioned previously, we are also conscious that these are big changes and that maybe there are some examples out in the community at the moment that people aren't so supportive of, and that we could do better in terms of the quality of medium density. So we are focused on density done well and quality, creating quality neighbourhoods. In terms of infrastructure, I will address that because I know that that is a question in a number of people's minds, is how do we provide for all this growth when we have some infrastructure issues across the city? And we know that, and we totally acknowledge that. So the spatial plan is a really key tool to feed into the council's longer term planning process around investing in that infrastructure, particularly in the three water space, but also our community facilities, our parks and open spaces. So if we have a plan about where we're going to grow, we can then start making those planning for that investment into the future. Sorry. So in terms of the proposals, so as I mentioned, up to at least 6 stories around those railway stations, so that picks up the Johnsonville line and stations along and through Tawa as well. And also at least 6 stories within a walking distance of metropolitan centres, so that picks up Johnsonville. We would also have to do the same in Kilbirnie, however we consider that there are some particular vulnerabilities in Kilbirnie that mean that it's not appropriate to go as dense as the National Policy Statement would require of us. So in terms of what we're talking about in terms of medium density housing, we've got 5 sort of housing typologies that we've applied across these 15 suburban centres, and the same typologies also will apply in the inner suburbs. But just to show you what we're talking about, so there are a number of different typologies in the medium density category, and we've applied these across the different centres based on that local context and what is appropriate in that context, with the exception, of course, the requirements that we now have under the NPS. So there's some pretty significant changes proposed for our northern and western suburbs. So in the likes of Johnsonville, for example, we're proposing up to 8 stories, and that's in the commercial centre. And then around that area on the map, you'll see that purple area, that's the map on the left-hand side down the bottom. That sort of bluey purple area is where the 6 stories is proposed. And similarly, you'll see in Towers, pretty significant changes there as well. And also through sort of Kandala, Nio, Crofton Downs area in the west. For our southern suburbs, you'll see on the map here, so some particular changes in through Brooklyn and Island Bay, Hataitai, Kilburnie, as I've mentioned, and not only are we not going as dense as the NPS requires, but before that policy statement came out, our assessment also showed us that there are some areas that are particularly vulnerable to sea level rise, and therefore not a good idea to intensify in those areas, and similarly in Miramar. So we have taken that into consideration in developing the spatial plan.